Hey, it's Lebo, and today we've got a 1974 Bally Sky Kings, and this game is pretty special. The pastor of my church has run a pinball machine for a long time, and also for a long time his wife said, "No, you don't need a game." Well, earlier this year they had their anniversary, and she decided it was time. She was going to get him a pinball machine, so she came to me and asked me if I could locate a game for him. And I kept my eyes open, looking for some potential candidates, and some came and went. Just wasn't the right one. But this one came along, and it was in an auction, and it worked out that I was able to get it. So brought it home and started going through everything. The overall condition of the game really wasn't really bad, but it definitely needed just a refreshing and fixing a few things to make it fully functional and ready to go home. So let's go over everything. So starting out with the playfield, everything was removed, all the plastics, the pop bumpers, the flippers, even all the posts. Everything was removed. Playfield was cleaned. There is a bit of planking, and to address the planking, what I ended up doing was just scrubbing things down, not too far because you don't want to go deep into the paint, which I didn't. But I did enough to where the planking just was not as prominent before the start of the work. Just because of the dirt, it was really getting into the grooves, and you could just really see it. And now it's really not near as bad. It looks a whole lot better. There were several little areas that just touched up with some acrylic paint and then clear coated over that to try to keep it lasting. Around like a lot of the black areas here, there was actually up here near the top where it says lights both lanes. Some of that was gone. I think the letter L, I can tell that was just slightly touched up, and the yellow around it had to mix some yellow to make that match well. But that was all painted and taken care of. The from the shooter lane as it goes around up here around to the orbit, just tried to clean up the wear track, and I put a little bit of an acrylic clear along that trail just to keep it from getting more dirt stuck into the wood grain. After all of the painting work was taken care of on the playfield, I covered it all with a good coating of carnauba wax and polished that down. So that's holding up well. The pop bumpers were rebuilt with all new parts except for the metal rings that was just didn't need to replace it, just polish the underside of it so that when it strikes the ball it hits a nice smooth surface to be able to promote throwing the ball out a little bit better. I did put floating mylar at the bottom to protect the playfield. The flippers, did the full rebuild kit, everything on those, including new actual flipper bats themselves. All of the bands that were put on were the Titan silicone bands. I've gotten to where I'm starting to really like those versus using the traditional rubber. They have similar elastic properties to rubber, which I tend to like for EM games, and they just are going to hold up better. They clean up better. I just like them so far. That everything that I've been fooling with those bands I've enjoyed. The plastics, these are actually the original plastics. They just cleaned up nice. They were not yellowed. Just basically had to clean them well. This one plastic, this top one, it did have a bit of warping to it, so I did the trick with, after cleaning it really well, stuck it between a couple sheets of glass, stuck it in the oven at a low temperature for around 10 or 15 minutes, brought it back out, let it cool down, and then it has taken a reset, and it's nice and flat. So all that was taken care of. Even the spinner here, I put new faces on it. All the metal parts, even a lot of the screw heads, just polish them down, just little things to make it look a little bit better. In addition to the pop bumpers being rebuilt, these mushroom bumpers, new parts for that too. What else? I guess that's the major parts of the playfield. Yeah, new target faces, all of the switches, everything was just tweaked and cleaned. But yeah, even some of the little metal parts here, they were all just polished out. Yeah, had the apron off. There's some parts underneath here you just will never see, but just wanted to clean it and make it nice anyways. So even the trail underneath there is actually polished. So if this is removed, you'll see it's a shiny underneath, and the metal rail here where the ball rides along that orbit, that was polished out. So next, let's move to the back box. So the back box, the glass was in fantastic shape. Really, there was really about nothing that I had to do to this glass. Didn't have to change the plastic around the edge. It had a little tiny piece there, it's gone. But nothing in the actual artwork had any wear at all. There's no wear marks from any of the scoring rails, there's probably a reason for that because they're just not anywhere close to it. Just no scratches. It's in fantastic shape. The scoring reels themselves, they were just super filthy. Just carefully cleaned it without wiping off any of the actual artwork on it, and that actually came out fine. What I ended up doing for the lights that are illuminating all the scoring reels themselves is I ended up using a dual flex warm white LED bulbs just to try to throw a nice amount of dispersed light all around each digit. So I'm happy with how that did turn out. LED bulbs all throughout the back. They're all Comet 2 S&D warm white bulbs. Mostly clear lens, I believe. May have used actually some frosted, but I've used a lot of the clear ones, and they've worked out better than I have thought. But yeah, this one has turned out fine. In the back, well, let's go back and take a good look at it. So looking at the back, replace the lock in the back just with a keyless latch. So taking the panel off, really just kind of went over a lot of switches, just give them a quick little scrub. Most of them were not bad. The credit unit, cleaned it up. The coil sleeves, replaced some of them. Actually, I think this one didn't have to replace. But one thing that I ended up doing is the ball count unit tells you which ball it's in play. It wasn't working right. So took this whole contraption apart, cleaned all the contacts. The little spring-loaded contact here gave it, bent it a little bit so it would make sure that it was giving a little more contact. That worked fine. The 0 to 90 unit, had to take it apart and do a little tweaking on it to make sure that it was working right, and it is doing fine now. But yeah, for the most part in the back box, didn't have to do a whole lot other than once I took the front glass out and to try to fix a couple of the bulb contacts when I was replacing the LEDs. But yeah, came out fine. So as for the cabinet, I really wanted to do a repaint job on this. The artwork is it's just a neat looking game. Just the theme of it, the the amount of detail that's in the art, it really is pretty cool. And this cabinet really is not in bad shape. The art is not in bad shape. There are some places where it is worn away. And instead of actually spending a lot of time trying to repaint it, what I ended up actually doing was just going over it and cleaning it, and that actually helped it quite a bit. There was a worn away area here where it was just completely down to wood, and what I did do was just recreate kind of a cloud in this area. The color didn't match exactly, but it looks, I think it looks pretty good to me. The actual artwork, there currently is not a stencil available. I would have used Pinball Pimp and actually talked with them about doing it, and they were willing to actually model it. They would use this game, but we just decided not to pursue it. This wasn't bad enough to where I really needed to have to sand it all down, and just decided not to. However, after cleaning all that, I did also actually went back and cleaned the metal rails here. They are brand new legs. They're chrome legs from Pinball Resource, and bolts, of course, and the leg levelers. The shooting rod. The rod is a new rod. I did polish out the handle. The way it normally comes, it's not polished, so polished that. This base was not available, and it was kind of rusty, but scrubbing it down and giving it a polish, it actually came out pretty nice. New barrel spring. There's a new shooter spring. Of course, the new tip, a silicone tip on the end. The lock bar, just cleaned it, polished it. Coin door, scrubbed it all down with Scotch-Brite. New bolts. Those are nickel plated bolts versus the original zinc, just to make it last and look a little shinier longer. Again, I put a keyless latch on the front. This is going to a home, really doesn't need to have a lock on it at all. It is all set up to free play, although the coin unit on the right does actually still work. It will trigger a couple credits for each quarter that gets put in, but yeah, it's turning out nice. Next, let's just take a look on the inside. So as I mentioned earlier, we put new flippers in, and the whole flipper mechanisms were rebuilt. I even used new coils, so new springs, new bushings, the arms. It was all new. The end of stroke switches. All of the coils, I re-sleeved them. They had metal sleeves, and I went to the plastic or nylon ones. This unit here that supports a lot of these relays, I had to drop that down to be able to get access to a lot of the bulbs that were underneath it. When I had that out, the underside of all the inserts, I used some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip just to get the dirt and clean them out. I got the new bulbs in, and that went together just fine. Here again, the pop bumpers, when those were rebuilt, had all that. Had to kind of fine tune a lot of the switches that were with those. The relay bank, had to clean several of those switches. They were, for the most part, they were doing fine. Didn't have to replace any of the relays. Even the lock relay is working fine. But I did have one issue that I thought was it was related to the lock or resetting the game over relay, and actually it ended up not really being a problem with the relay, but it did trace me down to the root cause, and where it ended up being was that on the solenoid that kicks the ball out in the trough up at the top of the playfield, there was a little short on a contact there, and it took me a little while to figure it out. But with a bunch of help online, I was able to finally find it. But the scoring motor, for the most part, didn't have to really do much of anything with it. I think there were a couple contacts that I scrubbed just to address a possible problem, but no, they worked out fine. For the most part, just cleaned, just blew out, vacuumed a lot of the dust that was in the area. The chimes, I took them apart, cleaned, polished the metal, put new rubber grommets. The solenoids that strike the chimes, put new sleeves in those, and put it back together. I did end up switching the one tap that is the lower voltage for, I think it's 53.5 volts, that would provide voltage to the solenoids. There is this other tap that you can go to that is 57.5, I believe, so it's an additional 4 volts, not a whole lot more, but I did switch it over to that, and the reason for that was that for the flippers, just to give them just a little more strength, so that it could throw the ball hard enough, just hard enough, to where when it would strike the captive balls to run them up, that the balls would actually make it all the way up to the top and hit the specials. So that was one little change that was done. The lock bar receiver bar, when I had it out, I cleaned it off, scrubbed it down, but I did see this neat looking label that Titan Pinball has. When I bought the silicone bands from them, I went ahead and bought this label, put that on. I just think it just kind of neatens it up a little bit, so I will probably continue to use them on some future games. I think that's just about it. Now comes the fun part, when we get to actually go play a game.